welcome back to my channel. Today I'm not just making gingerbread, I'm attempting to make a gingerbread bonfire. I had this idea a few weeks ago and I tried it out and it didn't work, and so I am determined to make it work. I'm going to start with showing you how to make my gingerbread biscuits, and I'm going to be doubling this recipe. This recipe isn't just delicious, it's so versatile. It's the same recipe that I use when I'm making gingerbread houses, gingerbread men, so it's kind of soft enough to just eat as a biscuit, but sturdy enough to build things up. So I have my plain flour in the mixing bowl, and I'm going to combine all the dry ingredients first. So I'm going to put my caster sugar in, some ground ginger and cinnamon, some bicarbonate of soda, and I'm going to put this on the mixer just to combine. So here I've got my unsalted butter cubed. Now it's not softened butter because then it will be too soft, but it's not freezing cold either. And I'm just going to drop it into the dry ingredients. And I'm going to leave that mixing until a kind of sand-like consistency is formed, which means all the butter's broken up and mixed with the dry ingredients before I add the wet ingredients. So once all the butter is combined, it really does feel like sand. It's really fine, which means it's all mixed in. And now it's time to incorporate the wet ingredients. So here I've got my eggs, and I've put them in a bowl on some scales because I'm going to weigh the syrups directly in the bowl. I find it easier to do it like this. I know it's in tablespoons, but I weigh everything anyway. Now, of course, I am using Lyle's golden syrup and their black treacle. That is my secret ingredient to my gingerbread. It gives it a real depth of flavor, and it's just delicious. So if you heat up a spoon in some boiling water and then pour it in using the hot spoon, the syrup just falls in. So what I'm going to do here is just whisk the eggs and syrups together. And I'll turn the mixer back on and add the wet ingredients to the dry and mix it until the dough forms. So it's pretty clear when the dough is formed because it really clumps together and you've got this lovely biscuit dough ready to be rolled. So I'm going to put the mixer away and gather up all the dough. So I'm just going to kind of, not knead it, but just squash the dough together. It smells so gingery and cinnamony and delicious. And now it's time to roll it out, so I'm going to get my baking trays ready. So gingerbread ready to roll. I've got a rolling pin and some extra plain flour, a knife to cut out the flame shapes, and some lined baking trays. So I'm actually going to roll this out half and then half again. I don't like re-rolling dough too many times because every time you roll it out, you're adding flour. So I'm going to do it bit by bit. I'm just going to throw it across the surface to make sure the gingerbread doesn't stick, and then some on top of the dough. And notice that I'm throwing it. It's something I learnt at school. Rather than kind of doing this and then you get like little piles of flour, if you throw it, firstly it looks cooler, but also you get an even layer of flour on the surface, and start rolling it out. I'm going to go backwards and forwards a few times, and then I'm going to spread it in the flour just to make sure it's not sticking, and rotate it, and then do the same again. So 3 or 4 times up and down, and then rotate. You can add a little bit more flour if you need, underneath or onto the surface. And you want to roll it out to about 1/2 centimetre thick. And to make sure that it's nice and flat, I just gently rub my hand over the top, and you can kind of feel if there are any bumps. So I can actually feel it's getting a bit thicker there, so I'll just roll it out a bit. Okay, so that seems really even. Now obviously if you're making any other shape, you usually use cutters, but I'm going freehand to make the bonfire. I'm going to cut out loads of individual flames, some larger and some smaller, because hopefully the bottom will start large and then it goes into smaller flames. And I'm going to do it freehand, so I've got a little knife. I'm just going to cut some almost like leaf shapes, but a bit more swirly. Something like that. And then just place them on a tray. So I'm going to do some different sizes. So these are going to be the larger flames. And I'm going to cook them on a separate tray to the smaller flames because they're going to take different times to cook. So the best part about this dough is that you can literally clump it together and roll it out again. I always try and avoid rolling it too many times because you've obviously added flour, but I don't really notice that much of a difference because it's quite a soft dough. So I've got a tray of the larger flames. Because they're going to sit at the bottom, I actually want a flat surface on some of them. So I'm just going to cut about a couple of centimeters from the top so they're going to sit on the surface nice and flat. The best part about this as well is that it could be rough and random shapes. Fire is all over the place, so it doesn't have to be neat. When the biscuits bake, the edges tend to become neater anyway. So I've spaced them out nice and evenly because they may expand in the oven. I'm going to roll out some medium and smaller flames, and then I'm going to bake them at 180 degrees Celsius for about 8 to 12 minutes, depending on the size of the flames. And what you're looking for is that they do go darker, even though it's a dark dough anyway. They'll go darker in colour, and they'll feel set but not hard. If they're hard, they're actually overcooked. You do want them feeling slightly soft, and that's the point you take them out of the oven. So once your biscuits are cooked, leave them to cool completely on the tray before you take them off. Because they're slightly soft, if you move them from the tray too quickly or too soon, they'll break. So I left them on the tray to cool, and they've come out really nicely, and as they cool, they also harden. And I've divided the sizes into 4. So I've got some larger flames here with the flat bottoms that I prepared before, some medium, some small, and then some very small flames. And what I've also done is, while I was waiting for the biscuits to cool, is I prepared some royal icing. So royal icing, if you haven't seen in my other videos, is really simple to make. All you need is icing sugar and egg white. You need a loose consistency, so I actually added a bit of water and made it runny. And what I've done is colour them in kind of, well, I think flame colours. So going from like a dark purpley red all the way to white. You can basically decorate the biscuits carefully and pipe and, you know, marble with a toothpick, which I actually did on my first bonfire that I found, but it takes a lot of time and I actually like the randomness more. So I'm going to use the dipping method, and for that I've got some shallow bowls, and I'm going to start with the larger flames, which means I'm going with the darker colours. I've got a cooling rack here, and these cooling racks are actually really clever and they're really handy when it comes to biscuits because they actually stack on top of one another. So I've got one of these at the ready, and into the bowl I'm going to put the darker red and the lighter red. And with a toothpick I'm just going to swirl the icing together. I'll get my first one. Now you can wear gloves, but I'm just going to hate myself later and go without gloves. This is the bottom of the flame, so that is going to go on the darker bit of colour. And all I'm going to do is dip the biscuit in, kind of move it around a bit as I'm lifting it off, and then you get a marbled biscuit. And what I'm going to do is lay that flat, and the icing, because it's quite loose, it will slowly relax and be flat. So there's obviously a little bump there at the moment, but it will eventually go really smooth. And this is definitely the quickest and most effective way of decorating biscuits. So the first layer is done and they're beautifully marbled, so it's exactly the effect that I wanted. So now I'm going to put another tray on top of this one, and it's a lot easier to do this without biscuits on the next one. And now I'm going to add the orange icing to the red. So like I did before, half red and half orange this time, because these are going to be on the slightly smaller flames. And then repeat the same process until I get to the smaller flames, which I'm going to mix the yellow and white together. So that didn't take too long, which is why I love that method. Now you need to leave the biscuits to completely set. Now I always set them overnight. And this is what happened with the last bonfire I tried, is that I tried to start constructing the whole thing when the icing was still wet and it was all just sliding all over the place. So I'm literally going to leave these overnight. I think they need a minimum of say 5-6 hours, but just to be sure, overnight is best. Okay, day 2 of my biscuit bonfire. I have checked the biscuits and they are 100% totally set. So I can even press on the icing and they don't smudge. I did end up checking them after 6 hours and they were still soft. So I recommend leaving them overnight to set. I'm not going to touch them just yet because what I'm actually going to do is, in my mind, I would have loved to kind of build up the structure and have it freestanding, but the last time I tried this, even though I was using a shape like this polystyrene cone, it just wasn't working. So I do think it needs to be on something. So I'm going to try out something new, which I've never done before, so I hope it works, but it's to make a kind of shape for the flames to stick on out of Rice Krispies and marshmallows. So I have been melting some marshmallows in a pot. Now I don't have a microwave, but I think it is easier if you do use a microwave for that, because these are easy to catch. And I've got a non-stick mat and my Rice Krispies here, and to stop it sticking from my hands, I've also just got some softened butter, which I'm going to rub over my hands. So wish me luck, because this is a first. So I'll start by adding the marshmallows to the Rice Krispies, and I'm going to mix them in. So I mixed the majority in, but I think it's time to get my hands stuck in. So before I do that, I'm just going to take a bit of butter in my fingers and literally rub my hands with butter. Oh my gosh, it is extremely sticky. So I think it's at the right kind of consistency now. It's still a bit sticky, but I can kind of hold it all in one without it going completely everywhere. So I'm going to transfer it onto this non-stick mat and almost knead it together just to make sure it's really mixed in properly. And now I'm going to build the shape out of the Rice Krispies. So I am still going for a kind of cone-like shape, but I'm also going to give it a larger bottom. God, that was actually really easy to mold. I think that is kind of the shape that I was after. Now actually, if you compare it to the cone I had before, this was taller, but it was thinner, and it didn't have kind of the volume at the bottom that a fire would have. So I'm happy with that shape, and I'm going to leave it there until it's completely set, and then attach the flames on. Okay, it's been about 20 minutes, and it's pretty set. In fact, I can lift the whole thing up, so I'm happy with that. Also, it is still a bit sticky, but that's only going to help stick the biscuits to it. I've got a turntable and a cake board, and I'm just going to transfer the cone shape onto here. I've also got a piping bag of my royal icing in here. Now this is thicker than the dipping consistency one because I'm going to use this as a glue. I am going to start from the top and work my way down though. Again, the first time I tried this, I started at the bottom, and then it was kind of a bit difficult to put the flames into each other, so I'd rather overlap them going down. And all I'm going to do is use the royal icing, and the stickiness from the Rice Krispies should help as well, and stick the biscuits until the whole thing is covered. I can't believe that it's actually worked. Kind of looks like a pine cone, but I'm going to ignore that. The last layer, I'm going to use the biscuits that aren't only just dark in colour, but the ones with the flat side, so they can sit directly on the board. And I'm also going to angle them slightly out just to get that kind of fire effect. believe it's worked. You don't know how happy I am right now. As you can see, there are some parts of roll icing which are poking through, and maybe the biscuits were sliding slightly, or when I wiped it away it left a mark. So what I'm actually going to do is fill the gaps, but also add the texture using some of my dehydrated apples. Now to make these, all you need to do is slice an apple really, really thinly, dip it in diluted food colouring and put them in the oven for an hour, hour and a half at 100 degrees Celsius, and they basically curl up. So I've dyed some red, orange and yellow, and all I'm going to do is just place them in the gaps. And I think they really add to the texture of the fire. I really love how the apples are looking. They really add to the texture and they give it the fire movement almost. So I've got some chocolate kind of logs here, which I've just rolled up, similar to my chocolate ruffles, and I'm just going to place them around the base. Last but not least, some gold glitter to make the fire sparkle. And there we have a biscuit bonfire, and it hasn't fallen down and it looks amazing, and I am so pleased with myself. We've got that delicious gingerbread made with Lyle's golden syrup and black treacle, who sponsored this video, so thank you to them. I've written all the recipes and quantities down below in the comments. If you have a go, then tag me at Georgia's Cakes, because I love seeing your creations and I really want you guys to try this because it is so much fun and it looks amazing and it also is delicious, obviously. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you have an amazing bonfire night, and I will see you next time.